And some of the biggest stories in auto news with our good friend, the car coach, Lauren Fix. Always a pleasure to have you on, Lauren. What do you see as the outlook? What do you see as the outlook for the industry moving forward as we hear these varying reports on when this chip crisis may come to an end? What's the takeaway from all of this?
Well, I've been talking to a lot of executives in the last few weeks, actually in person, so it's been great to get some real feedback. The chip shortage is impacting everybody equally. Not one brand is saying, we can get them, but they can't. So it does equalize the industry as far as not one brand being able to have an advantage over another. However, every brand is trying to come up with a solution. Ford is working with General Motors, Hyundai and Kia are working together, and so you're starting to watch a lot of groups together, and at the same time, they're going to do what's being called going vertical. So going vertical means they're going to control the supply chain of these boards, these chips, and I'm actually waiting for a vehicle myself, and there's a control module missing, and it has microchips in it. So there's nothing you can really do at this point. It's just part of the whole process. So vehicles are taking substantially longer to get from production to consumer, and this is not going to end until probably the end of 22. I've heard longer than that. We should have been done by this by now. And as a matter of fact, we talked about this a year ago, you and I, and we thought it would be done by now. But remember, there's a lot of plants opening here in the U.S., and that takes 3 years from inception to actually delivering the first chip.
Wow, and we know that especially when we're talking about these issues, they all seem to take so much time in order to be resolved. Now, when we look at where the auto sector is globally with these projections, it looks like 2022 will still be off the pace of the nearly 90 million vehicles sold in 2019 before the pandemic, while demand continues to outpace supply. So how much of a strain on the sector overall is this?
It's a huge strain on the sector as well as all the sub-suppliers. I mean, people typically think of the manufacturers themselves, but think about from tires to battery suppliers and so forth. And now we've got a shortage of another product that just got notified to the industry, and that's graphite. And you would think graphite like in a pencil, but no, this is graphite which is being used in batteries. And if there's a shortage of supply, of course, all of these mines are owned by China. This is going to put a restriction on electric vehicles and the delivery of those as well.
And now, Lauren, I mean, this is kind of a broad question, so I apologize for it to you here. But, when we talk about all these shortages, and especially when it comes to the microchips, does that kind of stifle innovation, too, as they can't really move forward and start to get into their next phase of what might be the next hot thing in the auto industry?
Right, and the next hot thing is adding more safety features that lead to autonomy. Mercedes-Benz is the first manufacturer to get approval for level 3 autonomy, which is more of that lane centering while driving where you could take your hands off the wheel. I've recently tested that on the Mercedes-Benz, the EQS, as well as the AMG EQS, and we see what the technology is coming up with. 52-inch screens, we're seeing huge screens, and that's fabulous, except it requires more chips. So that's gonna be the only limitation to moving to that next step and adding more safety and adding more technology and connectivity.
Now, when it does come to that push to add more technology and even that push to go electric, we've seen that a lot of companies are investing the money. They know that they're going to get there eventually. Now, with the likes of Toyota, one of the world's largest automakers, pushing to invest $70 billion in EVs with plans to sell 3.5 million electric cars in 2030. This all comes, of course, as the Biden administration is pushing for the transition, even setting aside $5 billion to establish 500,000 charging stations across the country. Is all of this movement actually going to push toward adoption in the near future, maybe?
Well, it's funny you asked that question because I'm constantly bringing the attention of reality to this. You can put as much money as you want into this. Putting in $500 billion is great. Putting in all these charging stations across the country is great. But still there has to be adoption from consumers, number one. And of course, purchasing these vehicles means they cost more, the insurance costs more, and then the charge time, which is still an issue for a lot of people. I recently drove the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which is one of the products that they've been promoting. It's actually a finalist for North American Car of the Year. And what's interesting is it has 800-volt charging base. So that means it'll charge you'll get about 80% in 18 minutes, which is probably one of the fastest other than a Porsche Taycan, which is certainly a different price range. So you're starting to see that transition that people want the faster charging. So any manufacturer that's still going with the 200 volt charging platform, the kilowatt platform, that's the one where they're not going to be able to catch up. You're going to find people spending the money, but they want that quick charge. We're an impatient society, as they say. But what's interesting as we push forward, we still can only produce so many electric cars. Consumers have to buy them. Even if there was a demand where we all had to buy them, we still have a lot of other issues with the infrastructure being able to support it. And it's going to take a lot more than what the Biden administration is talking about putting into this, because you'd need to have so many more charging stations in order for this to happen. And there's a problem in California with this right now, where there's not enough charging stations and too many cars, and people are actually fighting, like actually screaming at each other and fighting for connections to their vehicles because they have no way to get places. So we don't want this to happen, and so that would definitely be a detriment to the push forward on electric vehicles.
Absolutely, and California, for those outside of the United States, has probably the most charging stations of anywhere in the United States. So when you hear that, they already also have the most EVs on the road as well. Lauren Fix, the car coach, thank you so much for breaking all this down for us.
Thank you.